Hello and welcome to Copper Dragon Games, where we talk about Dungeons & Dragons, usually virtual tabletop resources. Today we got a special treat. I'm going through some maps from Heroic Maps. I just got the opportunity to interview Joe of the Joe and Sarah team over at Heroic Maps and talk to him a little bit about their new Foundry releases, one of which I'm going to be going through in detail in this video. Now these maps are from the DM Essentials pack, which is a collection of maps that were put together intentionally for DMs who need fairly generic maps to drop into any campaign. These are the essentials. These are the types of locations that you will find some variation on in most campaigns that you run across the board. These can be really handy if your players go off the rails and you need some kind of map to pop in at a moment's notice and just run with it because the map you thought you were going to be using, the players decided to go the opposite direction. There are a number of maps in this set. I'm going to preview them all here, give you a little commentary on each, and then let you decide for yourself. We're starting off with a cave. How many D&D campaigns have you been in that never ever included a cave of some sort? Probably some number close to zero. So this is a perfect example of the type of map that you can drop into pretty much any setting and it be perfectly fine. You'll notice with all of these maps that the lighting is already done for you. The walls are already done for you. Let me show you an example here. We'll go over to the walls. You can see the walls are already done. They're already in there. From the cave walls to the stalactites and stalagmites, this map is ready to roll. You can go ahead and drop your adventurers in here and let them start exploring. Get under the lighting, and you can see you've got some lighting coming in from the exterior here to show the entrance. And then you've got, on the other end, some glowing fungus of some sort, whatever the case may be. But either way, again, a simple map, something that you can drop into just about any campaign setting you can imagine. Now, Heroic Maps also has a sci-fi line, and even though technically I talk primarily about D&D on this channel, a cave system is something that you could drop into a sci-fi setting as well, or a Wild West setting, or you name it. Even though this is technically in their fantasy range, you could easily drop some stormtroopers or space marines or aliens or what have you in this map, and it'd be perfectly suitable for any of a variety of settings. So let's look at these city streets. With city streets, we have a pretty typical medieval style village. I really like that the roofs are different colors. A lot of times you find maps that were made with different programs that are pretty common in our niche of D&D gaming, and the roofs in those programs tend to be kind of samey from map to map, and here within one map you have a color variation. You've got blue, you got greens, you got some reddish tones, you've got different textures between the different roofs. They're not huge differences between the textures, but it is noticeable. You can definitely see it, and it lends to some of the variety of what you see in the image. It's just nicer, a little more realistic than what you pick up in some other maps that are out there on the market. This map doesn't come with the interiors of the buildings, but Heroic Maps does have a line of building interiors that you could easily set up as the interiors of these buildings with different ways of entering and exiting, whether you're using the stairs module or something like multi-level tokens or whatever. This one would be a little harder to pull off in a sci-fi setting, but for those of us who play D&D primarily, this is again the type of map that you could use in pretty much any campaign you can think of. So let's check out the Crypt next. So with the Crypt, we've got a classic dungeon crawl type setting with lots of tombs and coffins, and I can just see all manner of undead creeping out of this thing to terrorize your party. This is a variation on a type of map that again is very common in traditional fantasy settings. Very easy to plop down in pretty much any campaign you can think of. I've said that too many times now. I'm going to try to stop being so repetitive. But it is a good point. In any case, it is cool. It is so cool, especially with these maps that have all these little like enclaves and side chambers that the walls are already done. Now for me, I enjoy walling off maps. I think that's kind of part of the fun of DM prep, but at the same time, if you need something really quickly, having some maps where it's already done for you can be a huge lifesaver in that moment when you thought your players were going to zig, but instead they zag. One of the things that make this product really cool is having the walls already done here in these sections that don't necessarily fit with your grid perfectly. Now, if all the walls on your map line up with your grid perfectly, then it's really easy to just do the snap to grid option and you can wall off a map super fast. But most spaces in the real world are not built with a 5-foot grid in mind, and so when you get these spaces that mimic closer to real life tunnels or dungeons or whatever, you're going to find some of these odd spaces kind of jutting off to the side in different places, that kind of thing. And these can actually take a surprising amount of time to wall off when you're doing it manually. Super helpful to have this already done for you in this map pack. So let's look at a more traditional dungeon here. This is the one Joe and I talked about specifically in the interview, which you can check out in the description below or at the end of the video and the end screen. Again, we've got a pretty traditional setting here, a pretty generic setting that you could drop into any campaign. Lots of different pathways and side chambers that your players can get into and find ways to get themselves killed, like with the gelatinous cube that I believe Joe mentioned he put in this top middle room in his own campaign that he was running. Got the whole set walled off here, including a secret door here at the bottom of the page. Not a lot of lighting on this one, but this circular room here at the end does have a bit of lighting here, but at the same time this is supposed to be a deep dark dungeon, so you may not want a ton of lighting here, and you can always add some in later with your own torches or fire effects or whatever. Moving right along, an evil temple is another quite common trope in fantasy settings, and the Heroic Maps team does not disappoint here. We've got the traditional temple complex with the big fiery area in the middle. I'm sure there's some kind of evil ritual that's going to happen in this room. I'm just sure of it. You've got some chambers and things for all your cultists to be residing, and some other side chambers. Very interesting setup here. I love that there's lots of lighting in this one. There are some fires on the original map, and you can see once you zoom in, and you can see how the lighting in Foundry really lends itself to the lighting. Some of it is built in, already drawn in and colored with the artwork, but then you get this flickering effect that is not in the original artwork. I'm going to turn this light off so you can see the original artwork already has some of that firelight drawn in, colored in, if you will, to show where that fire is lighting the immediate area. But one of the advantages of Foundry is getting these lighting effects that really let you turn that on and really emphasize that. So with that said, let's hop over to our next map in this set, which is the Forest Clearing. Got another great map here that fits lots of different settings. This is another one that doesn't have anything in the map that tells you what time period it takes place in. So you could just as easily place this on some kind of wilderness planet in the far future with some space marines or whatever battling aliens, what have you. Or if it's right at home in a generic D&D fantasy setting. You've got a clearing in the middle, you got some thicker forests, trees and undergrowth and such on the side that block players' paths, and then a little bit of elevation here in the bottom left corner. I do love that they take advantage of the terrain walls here, so you block movement with these without actually stopping your players from seeing how gorgeous the map is. Traditional walling here with trees would block them off and make them you would see the edges, but you wouldn't get to see how nice the actual artwork is in the scene. And then in cases where you have two sets of walls, terrain walls, that somebody would be seeing through, it does block vision to the opposite side. And lighting in this map is already set up to unrestricted vision range. So because it's outdoors, you don't need specific lighting effects. You can just go ahead and set it up so that players can see as far as daylight lets them before something gets in the way. Then we'll switch over to the inn and tavern. Got a pretty traditional inn and tavern here. You can see we got the fireplace going in both spots. We've got a little bar here where you can put your barkeep to spread some local rumors. Got the rooms in the back that your players can rent, stables for their horses, or whatever other mounts that they're using, and some traditional tables here to plop in some NPC patrons that will certainly liven things up. All in all, a solid in Tavern map. Our next one is the Rural Road, which is very similar to the Forest Clearing, except there's a little more elevation here, and you have a defined road that players could be traveling. It'd be a great map for an ambush, or for bandits to be hanging out up on the cliffs and firing arrows down at the party if they don't agree to pay tribute, or whatever the case may be. Just a handy little map to drop in wherever you need it when your players are exploring the wilderness and you need a spot for a random encounter. Next up, we have the Rural Ruins. Rural is a surprisingly hard word to say. Rural. Anyway, there's not a lot left of these ruins. You can tell that most of whatever this used to be is gone now. But this is the perfect place to have the lair of some monster or whatever, maybe an ogre hanging out here that's terrorizing travelers, or maybe a great random place for players to happen across as they're traversing your hex crawl, or maybe a way to indicate to your players that there is an underground complex here. You can drop in a trapdoor tile, or a stairways tile, or something of that sort to signify that there's a lower level, and then lead them down into a dungeon, maybe even one of the ones that also exists in this pack of maps. And lastly, we have the Rural Village, which is similar in a lot of ways to the city streets, except that, again, a little more rural. This would be a great map to drop in for some random small village on the map that has not been mapped officially, or it would be a fine spot for some little tiny village that is so small it doesn't even show up on the map. Maybe your players run into it as they travel the world, and maybe through their endeavors make enough noise in this town to build up its importance and put it on future maps. Now, Heroic Maps also has a ton of more specific locations, some more unique locations, but this group of maps in particular is meant to be generic. It's meant to be usable by any DM who's picking this up and wanting a backup plan for when the players take an alternate route. And once you have this add-on installed, it really is as easy as just hopping over to your compendiums and importing the map, dropping players on it. Maybe dropping some monsters on it too, but you know the deal. And Joe from Heroic Maps was kind enough to give us a 30% off discount code for this set in particular. So before you leave, make sure you go down and check that out in the description of the video. And if you want to hear Joe talk about the maps themselves and his company and how things are going with Foundry and their new add-ons, hop over in the end card that'll pop up in just a moment and click on that link as well. If you enjoyed this video and found some value in it, I want to encourage you to check out our other videos and playlists, which you can find right here. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe so you can follow along. And if you want to make sure you never miss anything, click that notification bell before you go as well. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.